Much anticipated meet between US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping has concluded.
President Joe Biden addressed the media detailing the progress made between the two leaders. In a major outcome of the high-stakes meet, both nations have agreed to resume military-to-military communications and cooperate on anti-drug policies. Listen to this.
I'm pleased to announce that after many years of being on hold, we are restarting cooperation between the United States and PRC on counter-narcotics. We're reassuming military-to-military contacts, direct contacts. As a lot of you press know who follow this, that's been cut off, and it's been very worrisome. That's how accidents happen, misunderstandings. So we're back to direct, open, clear, direct communications on a direct basis.
China suspended military communication after former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan last year. United States and China's militaries have had a number of near misses and acrimonious exchanges over the past year. Now, with the recommencement of ties, both countries have agreed to resume military-to-military communication.
Both leaders have also agreed to cooperate on addressing the source of the opioid fentanyl, a leading cause of drug overdoses in the United States. Under the agreement, officials say that China has to take steps to dramatically cut the production of ingredients for the drug. Talks also touched upon other friction areas, which included the Taiwan issue. Not toning down on the issue, though, Xi Jinping told Joe Biden to stop arming Taiwan and that China's reunification with the self-ruled island was unstoppable. Biden also responded to this, saying he assured Xi Jinping that Washington was determined to maintain peace in the region, but he asked Xi Jinping to respect upcoming elections in Taiwan.
Both leaders held first in-person talks this year. They met last year in Bali during the sidelines of the G20 summit. However, the ties have been frayed since then. Contentions have intensified over Taiwan, the South China Sea, tech dominance, stance on Ukraine war, among other issues. Biden during the meet said United States and China have to ensure that competition between them does not veer into conflict. He said that at the time, world faces several critical global challenges. It demands their joint efforts.
I value our conversation because I think it's paramount that you and I understand each other clearly, leader to leader, with no misconceptions or miscommunication. We have to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict. And we also have to manage it responsibly, that competition. That's what the United States wants and what we intend to do. I also believe it's what the world wants for both of us, candid exchange. We also have a responsibility to our people and the world to work together when we see it in our interest to do so.
While Xi Jinping, who is on a US visit for the first time in 6 years, said that turning back on each other is not an option for US and China. He added that US-China relations have kept moving forward amid twists and turns. He also highlighted several problems the world is facing right now, specifically the economic impact of COVID-19, and said that it demands greater US-China cooperation.
作为世界上最重要的双边关系，中美关系要放在世界百年变局加速演进这个大背景下来思考和谋划，为两国人民带来福祉，为人类进步展现担当。
The two leaders conducted a 4-hour meeting on the outskirts of San Francisco and will now move for APEC summit. As US-China tensions have grown, both nations have increased diplomatic efforts while they seek to stabilize ties. A series of meetings have taken place recently between the United States and Chinese high-ranking officials, which has culminated in the Xi-Biden meet. Reports say Chinese president is currently under domestic pressure to revive the economy after years of stalled growth, and that is his priority for the discussions.
Now, Xi Jinping was met by protesters who took to streets ahead of the Xi Jinping-Biden meeting. Hundreds moved through the city's center near the San Francisco Convention Center, chanting "Free Tibet" and "Free Hong Kong," while some pro-China protesters also gathered near the APEC summit venue.
Now, to discuss this further, we're being joined by Mr. Charles Carather, who is a principal at Cornerstone Government Affairs. Mr. Carather has also served as a professional staff member with the Committee on Homeland Security in the United States House of Representatives. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sir, of course, let's first things first. What would you say were the big takeaways from this bilateral?
Yeah, so I think the key takeaways is that, this meeting comes amid the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders Meeting. I really think this is a good opportunity for both world leaders to reset the relationship and really come to the table on many key issues. And the three key takeaways really is a big win for the United States, more especially when it comes to, restarting cooperation with China on the counter-narcotics mission. Big win for the United States. Every year, roughly 100,000 Americans, die from overdose, and many of those overdose deaths come from fentanyl or fentanyl-related overdoses. United States citizens between the ages of 18 and 49, around 10,000 from that particular age group die every single year from fentanyl, more than any other cause of death in the United States, right? So getting China to agree to curb the flow of fentanyl, the chemical precursors used to make fentanyl, and the pill pressors, I think is really, really big in this first step. Second, reassuming, that direct military to military contact is very, very important. As you indicated earlier, over 100 incursions between the United States military and the Chinese military. This direct communication was previously cut off. Now it's back on. So when China calls, we will answer, and when we call China, they will answer. And then again, on the tech space, the third takeaway was highlighted by President Biden. It was, the risk associated with artificial intelligence. I think those are going to be the three key takeaways.
Mr. Carather, I just want to come back to the second takeaway that you mentioned, the military-to-military communications between US and China, which have resumed. It's a huge development. Talk to us about the implications here, given the kind of scenario that we're in with two wars going on.
Yes, so it's very important that these two nations, don't step on each other's feet, don't, escalate, military intervention with each other. What do I mean by that? Over 100 incursions, right? And so there's oftentimes, there's a propensity to escalate, right? And when things escalate, there could be, destruction, there could be loss of life, loss of damage, and it could really have a real severe impact on foreign policy that the two countries are trying to pursue. So that direct military-to-military contact, I think, is key, more especially as you see with China, building up in the South China Sea.
Right, Mr. Carather, of course, no one was expecting all these standing issues to just evaporate. And that being said, I believe it's only fair that there were some issues that were dealt with directly, and Xi Jinping told the United States to stop arming Taiwan, says that the reunification, it's unstoppable in very clear words. Joe Biden has asked Xi Jinping to respect the electoral process in Taiwan. And at the same time, we also see that news of China's objections at the APEC summit had emerged, statement on Taiwan. Of course, the two nations are not on the same page when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war as well. So these issues do stand. It's going to be a difficult balancing act going forward. So what's your assessment of how these ties will evolve going forward?
Well, I think going forward, it's going to be very, very important for this necessary dialogue, this free flow or freer flow of communication between two nations at varying levels of diplomacy. You mentioned the war in Ukraine, Russia's illegal invasion of a sovereign nation. President Biden really didn't show his hand on what specifically was discussed. But I know in previous conversations, that, he wants to curb China's involvement with that particular war, more especially supporting Russia in their unjust war, whether it be selling munitions, weapon systems, ammunition, things of that nature, right? When it comes to the Israel Hamas war, he didn't show his hand at all, even though probably 60% of the questions raised were about that particular conflict. But the fact that we now have kind of restored open lines of communication, I think we're in a better position to really let diplomacy put its best foot forward.
Mr. Carruthers, now the world has watched the two leaders meet. The entire world has taken notice of the statements which have come in from the two fronts. Talk to us about what Vladimir Putin would be thinking at the moment.
Yeah, so in my assessment, Vladimir Putin really wants to ensure a strong relationship with China. He has very few allies left, right? So he's going to lean heavy on China to, be a source of diplomatic refuge, kind of like be a silent advocate for him on the United Nations Security Council. I think things of that nature when it comes to the global diplomacy, because Vladimir Putin and Russia is now really a foreign pariah, right? And with very few friends left. So, Russia will continue to rely heavily on China for China's real sphere of their global influence.
Now, of course, US President Joe Biden did mention that there is competition. That will always remain, but that should never veer into conflict, given how aggressively the United States is projecting the IPEF as an alternative to China. Can the nations draw a line between competition and conflict? Again, it's going to be a difficult balancing act here.
So, I think President Biden said something very, very important this evening. He said, we have to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict. Both countries realize that, they're extremely powerful, that they're economic superpowers, and that for global stability, you really, really need healthy competition, not conflict, right? I think both sides realize that a direct conflict with each other would really destabilize the globe and really doesn't benefit anyone.
Mr. Carruthers, now, initially you had also mentioned that how this meeting was a win for the US. Now, I just want to draw your attention to this statement which had come in from Joe Biden saying that they really need leader-to-leader talks. And he did rely upon his personal relationship with Xi Jinping over the years to, solve the issue. Do you feel he's gaining some kind of mileage here on a personal front with the elections around the corner?
Well, I think first and foremost that, President Biden is concerned more about the safety and security of the United States, its allies at home and abroad, and more especially with global security versus the upcoming presidential election. And just one point of clarity, I just want to emphasize, when I said this is a win for the United States, I just really wanted to reinforce that when it comes to China stepping up on counter narcotics, that was a huge win for the United States, given how many people overdose on fentanyl, more especially that 18 to 49 age range. So, that curbing, fentanyl and its chemical precursors, I think is a big win for the United States, if in fact China abides by this.
Right, sir. And as my colleague also mentioned, domestic pressure, that's a variable that we have to take into account. As per reports, Chinese president is currently under domestic pressure to revive the economy after years of stalled growth.
Yes.
So, what's your assessment? How important do you think a smooth meeting with President Joe Biden was for President Xi Jinping, given the dwindling foreign investments in China?
I think it's very important that these meetings present some sense of stability for China's economy. You have to keep in mind, outside investments to China about 1 to 2 years ago was around, upwards around $2 billion. Now, within this recent past year, it's around like a few hundred million, if that, right? So, China realizes the economic implications here, and it's in their best economic interest to really, stabilize diplomatic ties with the United States.
All right, Mr. Caritas, we'll let you go for now. Thank you so much for joining in and sharing all your insights on this. Lots to discuss going forward. We'd love to have you back on World DNA again.
Thank you.
Right.